Howdy YouTube. This thing, the 12-inch double bevel Harbor Freight, aka Chicago Electric chop saw, has been in the background in a lot of videos that I've done. It used to sit right back there where the toolbox was, and it was over here, and so it's kind of made appearances all over the channel. And so a lot of people have posted comments in other videos and said, hey, what about the Harbor Freight saw? Tell me about the Harbor Freight saw. Well, today we're going to tell you about the Harbor Freight saw. I picked this one up specifically to do the shed project. That's a whole series that you can see if you check this out right here. And I have to say that for the shed, it worked out great. In fact, I can't imagine having done that project without a tool of this type. That shed project is basically made to order for a saw like this. I was trying to keep the budget under control, so Harbor Freight price, always a good thing. I needed to cut some 4x4s, even a couple of 6x6s, so the 12-inch blade and sliding capacity came in really handy. The 12-inch blade actually only gives you about 4.5 inches of cut capacity because there's a big old thick nut on the arbor up here. Anyway, it's still enough to go through a 4x4 in one cut. Not the 6x6s though. Even though they're not really 6 inches wide, you still do have to make a cut and flip them and cut them again to go the whole way through. So I used the depth capacity on some of the thicker woods that made up the framing, and I actually used some of the sliding capacity as well when I had to gang cut lots and lots and lots of 2x4s for the walls. The ability to slide this thing means that you can safely put 2, 4, 6 2x4s on there, kind of in a short pile, so that you're still up against the fence and you can plow through them all at one time. And then of course there's the just countless cuts for the wall studs, some angles to make the roof trusses. There's lots and lots of stuff in and around the framing of a building and later putting up the trim that are pretty much what this saw was designed to do. Since the completion of the shed though, this has been a shop tool. I mounted it finally to a rolling base. This is left over from a Ryobi job site saw. And I do find that having this particular tool mobile is handier than you might think because it makes a giant mess. And so taking it outside is definitely a good thing. Mobile also allows me to kind of stash it out of the way in a corner. And that turns out to also be a good thing because now that I'm here in the shop and not at a construction site, quite frankly, I don't use this thing that much. It's relegated pretty much to taking rough stock and cutting it down to rough lengths. And that's really about it. To be honest, the work that this saw does anymore could just as easily be done with either a handheld circ saw or even more safely a jigsaw. So why is that? Well, in a word, accuracy, or more specifically, a significant lack of accuracy that's provided by the way this saw is built. Let me move the camera around and I'm going to show you the just 2 or 3 things that to me make this saw a no-go even at its $150 price tag. Now for starters, I do want to be reasonable about this. It's a $150 12-inch double bevel slider. The next step up in a saw with this kind of capacity is close to $400. If you want to start talking about a brand name like a DeWalt or a Bosch, you're up to $500, maybe $600, and you can go all the way up to, you know, the Festool Capex is over $1,000, and it's only a 10-inch blade. So yes, there's lots to complain about in this saw, but my intent here is not to tell you all the things you're not going to get by not spending $600. My intent is to give you the information that you need to decide whether or not, for the type of project you're doing, this is going to be good enough. So the number one beef with the saw is just how flimsy the mechanism really is. A lot of this thing is cast aluminum. These are in fact steel rods back here, but if you tap on them, they're pretty thin. The whole saw flexes, and it flexes a lot. I lifted the blade up to get it outside of the zero clearance insert, which I had to make, by the way. And I don't know if you can really see from that camera angle, but I can flex this blade clear to either side of that zero cutout slot. So I've got a full blade kerf worth of flex either side. And I'm pushing on it pretty hard, but not with my whole body weight or anything. And at that, this is in its sturdiest position. This is with the slider all the way slid back, so we don't have the length of the slider rails to deal with in the flex. If you have it all the way out here at the back, it flexes just that much more. The saw also has a kind of a things don't line up problem between the plunge mechanism and the slide mechanism. And I'll see if I can make a quick cut here and just show you what I mean. First, I'm going to cut just the back part of this board with the plunge mechanism. And I intentionally didn't cut that all the way through because I want this board to stay pretty stable. Now I'm going to slide the blade back and I'm going to bring the cut up until I meet the first one. As you can see, the plunge cut and the slide cut, they just don't line up. They are not on the same plane. That makes calibrating this saw basically impossible. You've got to pick whether you want the plunge cut or the slide cut to be perpendicular to that back fence. And then if you really, really need a square cut or any other angle, you're going to have to stick with that mechanism for cutting and just sort of ignore the other one. So as a fine woodworking tool, we're done already, right? Those cuts that don't line up, there's no way you're going to get miters that come together to make a picture frame or, anything where you need even the remote little bit of accuracy for your project to work out. For what it's worth, the miter adjustment has almost exactly the same problem. This little tab that's underneath here that locks the miter at 0 and 15 and 45 and all of those things is plastic. And it's plastic with one tiny pin running through a pair of aluminum fingers on the bottom of this thing. So if you don't have it screwed down, which mine is screwed down at the moment, but you can rock this thing back a couple of degrees. If you want to set it up for a particular angle, the stop is useless. You got to get out your bevel gauge or your square or whatever and line up the blade to the fence every time you change the angle of the cut. There's lots and lots of other stuff to gripe about on this saw. The laser, pointless. There is no way to really get it aligned with the blade. The things that are supposed to be your table extensions are a joke. This is locked down. The stop for 0 degrees on the vertical tilt is plastic. When you loosen this up in the back, you can easily push this well past the 0. And so basically you're back to, you got to get the square every time you want to move this thing. Dust collection is just a terrible joke on this thing. But to be fair, it's a miter saw. And my understanding is that dust collection is a joke on all of them. It's just a question of how funny it is. Now here's a little bit of irony for you. This saw used to come with a blade. I bought it back when this guy, which is a 60-tooth carbide tipped no less, 12-inch blade, came with the saw. It's probably the best part of the saw. Best as I can tell, the blade runs true, has those nice carbide teeth on it. 60 is, I think, a pretty good number for a saw like this. It's good balance between getting through your cut and leaving a nice cut quality edge. So of course, that's the thing they took out, right? If you go and drop $150 on this saw with coupon, etc., today, you're not going to get the blade. You're going to have to buy that separately. So clearly this should be in my pile of like Harbor Freight things that I throw across the garage and you hear them land somewhere, right? Well, not so fast. Remember, I said I bought this to do a construction project. I bought this to build a shed, and it did that with flying colors. It was easy to take out to the job site. It has enough power to do what it needs to do, but it still runs fine on the end of a very, very long extension cord. And as long as you pick and choose whether you're going to use chop or slide as your cutting mechanism, you can line it up so that it will make 90 or 45 or whatever degree angle cuts you're going to make. So no, it is fair to say that I would not buy this saw again today with the projects that I envision coming up and knowing what I know about this saw. I've moved from a construction project over to more woodworking, and so really this just doesn't meet my needs. Likewise, even if you were doing job site work that required some precision like molding or trim, this is definitely not the guy that you want. But if you're building chicken coops You're putting up a deck. You have a swing set that you're trying to throw together. You get the idea. You have a project where you need to be able to bring the saw to the work. You don't necessarily want to spend $600 because you're not buying a lifetime tool. You're buying a project tool. This will get the job done. Make yourself a zero clearance insert for the throat plate on here. Keep the chop locked down so that you're only using the sliding mechanism to make the cuts, and use a square when you line up the blade with the fence and lock it down. Just ignore the markings that are anywhere on this saw. You're going to be fine. You're going to be able to cut deck boards or fence posts or whatever it is you need to cut with more than enough accuracy for construction type work. And I'll be honest, even on the woodworking side, I'm going back and forth as to whether a miter saw, much less a double bevel slider, really has any place in my woodworking shop. Since the nature of this saw has forced me to relegate it to cross-cutting rough stock, I've been forced to find other ways, mostly at the table saw, to do the accurate cross-cutting that I need. And you know what? They work great. I love my sled. I need to build a miter sled. That's going to be a relatively straightforward thing to do. And then, hold on to yourselves, there are such things as hand tools. There are planes, there are shooting boards. There are lots and lots of ways to get straight and angled cuts clean and in the right spot without necessarily having to spend $600 to get one of these that's really dialed in. So there's my 2 cents on the Harbor Freight 12-inch slider. If you're doing construction projects, big thumbs up. You will not find a better value for this capacity if that level of accuracy is all you need. For woodworking projects, big old thumbs down. It's going to do nothing but frustrate you. And as you may have noticed in this video, I didn't really make any modifications to this thing other than the zero clearance insert. The nature of this saw is just, it kind of is what it is. It's a basic construction flimsiness that you can't fix with a simple mod. So not only is it not appropriate for fine woodworking, you can't make it that way. Quick maple update. The bugs are dead. Looks like the homebrew kiln and/or 20 Mule Team borax did them in. So next week we will in fact start on the new workbench. Till then, y'all stay safe, YouTube.